WWE has given us fans countless magic moments throughout its history. We've had unforgettable matches, iconic superstars, and dramatic storylines that have kept us on the edge of our seats. However, for every brilliant bit of booking they've also made a few bad choices too. So, these are my picks for the 10 biggest booking errors in WWE history. Let me know if you agree with my list, and let me know your personal picks too down in the comments. WrestleMania 17 is often hailed as one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. It featured a fantastic main event between Steve Austin and The Rock. As the match reached its climax, Vince McMahon came to the ring, and what happened next shocked everyone. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the ultimate anti-hero, aligned himself with his ultimate enemy, Vince McMahon. The moment put a dampener on what was an otherwise fantastic WrestleMania. The decision to turn Austin heel was a booking error for several reasons. Stone Cold was still really popular with the fans, so turning him heel alienated a large portion of the fan base. The audience just wasn't ready to boo their hero, and it was hard for fans to believe that Austin would ever join forces with his greatest enemy. It was totally against his character type, and really when you think about it, it made no sense. The WWF's popularity started to decline in 2001, and while Austin's heel turn wasn't entirely to blame, it certainly didn't help. Many fans never thought they'd see Sting in WWE. He held out for over 13 years after WCW went under, and he never really showed any interest in joining the company. However, that all changed at the 2014 Survivor Series, where he appeared for the first time. Fans couldn't wait to see how WWE was going to book one of the most iconic superstars in wrestling history. Many fans hoped that we would finally get that dream match between Sting and The Undertaker. But no, it was Triple H that ended up issuing a challenge, and so a no disqualification match was set for WrestleMania 31. In the build-up, they went back to the old trope of WWE versus WCW. It was very lazy booking indeed. The match itself ended up being an overbooked mess too, with interference from DX and the NWO. Then Triple H attacked Sting with a sledgehammer and pinned him for the win. This was a terrible booking decision, and Sting absolutely should have won his debut WWE match. Instead, they went back to the tired WWE versus WCW narrative, with WWE winning once again. Sting was only in the company for a short amount of time, but the entire thing was a massive letdown, and many fans ended up wishing that he'd never signed with them in the first place. The Nexus debuted with a bang in June 2010 when they attacked John Cena and created absolute chaos. Week after week, the Nexus were built up as a dangerous and dominant group, and it was all going to come to a head at SummerSlam, where the Nexus would face off against Team WWE in an elimination tag team match. Team WWE were going to be led by John Cena, but this should have just been the first chapter in a much bigger story for the Nexus, and obviously they should have come out of this match victorious. However, the match's outcome was a huge letdown. Despite being outnumbered, Cena single-handedly overcame the Nexus, securing the victory for Team WWE. The result instantly deflated all of the momentum that the Nexus had built up. Cena's victory destroyed the faction's credibility, making them look weak and ineffective. Even John Cena later admitted that this decision was a big mistake. Cena went on to face Nexus leader Wade Barrett in a series of matches, but he never put him over clean. In fact, Cena made him look like an idiot in every encounter. Some members of the Nexus went on to become stars in their own right, while most of them just disappeared from WWE, never to be seen again. The incident at WrestleMania 9 between Hulk Hogan Bret Hart and Yokozuna is a prime example of terrible booking in WWE history. Bret Hart was gaining momentum as the WWF champion going into WrestleMania, and he was set to face Yokozuna in the main event. Hart was getting respect and admiration from the fans, and his title reign was seen as a new direction for the company after the 80s era that was dominated by Hulk Hogan. However, his momentum came to a halt when he lost the title to Yoko at WrestleMania. Then Hulk Hogan made a surprise appearance and challenged Yokozuna, and he ended up beating him in just 22 seconds flat to become the new champion. The decision to crown the Hulkster as the champion made it clear that Vince McMahon just couldn't let go of his infatuation with Hulk Hogan. Some people have said that the decision to make him the champion once again was due to an upcoming international tour, and they thought that having Hogan as champion would help boost their ticket sales. However, Bret Hart has always suspected that Hogan got into Vince's ear backstage and persuaded him to make him the champion. And years later, Hogan did admit to that being the truth. In the end, it was all for nothing because Hogan still ended up leaving the WWF to join WCW just a little while later. The Brawl for All was the WWF's experiment to blend real combat sports with the theatre of pro wrestling. The idea was to capitalise on the growing popularity of MMA and to push their new star, Dr. Death Steve Williams, as a legitimate tough guy on the roster. Despite the fights featuring WWF superstars, it was a totally real and unscripted event, and as you might imagine, it turned out to be a terrible idea. The rules were confusing to both the participants and the fans just weren't interested in watching real fighting. They'd paid to see wrestling, for goodness sake. But it ended up causing multiple injuries, with star fighter Dr. Death suffering a torn hamstring. He ended up getting knocked out by Bart Gunn, who was the eventual tournament winner. For years, Vince McMahon was obsessed with making Roman Reigns the company figurehead. He wanted him to be a modern-day Hulk Hogan, with the fans seeing him as their hero, but the WWE Universe had other ideas. The big push started in around 2014 and continued on for years, despite the fans rejecting him. They booed Reigns relentlessly, even when he was positioned against the company's top heels, and fans felt like their voices were being ignored as Reigns won back-to-back Royal Rumbles and headlined back-to-back WrestleManias. But McMahon stubbornly carried on with his pet project, often at the expense of other superstars on the roster. Fans disliked several aspects of Reigns beyond just the relentless push. His character felt forced and lacked authenticity, with scripted promos that often came across as unnatural. The Superman-style booking where Reigns would consistently overcome overwhelming odds made his matches predictable and boring. WWE eventually relented and turned him heel in 2020, but we'll never forget that tortuous 6 years of babyface Roman Reigns. The handling of the Invasion storyline is one of WWE's worst ever booking errors. Back in 2001, fans were shocked when Vince McMahon bought WCW, but after the dust had settled, everyone was excited to see what Vince McMahon was planning. All through the 90s, fans had speculated on what it would be like to see the superstars of the WWF and WCW go up against each other in a massive interpromotional battle. The storyline had the potential to be epic, but in the end it was a massive letdown. And that's because most of WCW's top stars just weren't there. Icons like Goldberg, Sting and the NWO were missing from the battle. This happened because the WWF didn't buy out their expensive contracts with Time Warner, and as a result, the invading forces was made up of mid-carders from WCW, and it was watered down with former ECW wrestlers. Plus it didn't help that Vince McMahon's ego got in the way. He just couldn't bear to see the WCW guys beating the WWF guys, and so the storyline became incredibly one-sided. It also descended into a confusing mess as WWF stars started to switch sides. Predictably, Team WWF came out victorious at the 2001 Survivor Series, which ended the most anticipated and disappointing story in wrestling history. Heading into WrestleMania 19, Booker T was starting to get over as a main event superstar. A victory over Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship would have taken his career to new heights. But the build-up to their match was uncomfortable, with some fans believing that Triple H's words were racist. He made several disparaging remarks about Booker, saying that people like you don't get to become world champion, and he made a comment about Booker T's hair. He went on to imply that someone with Booker's past just didn't get to be the world champion. This created a narrative where fans expected Booker to overcome these prejudiced remarks and emerge victorious at WrestleMania. However, the outcome of the match saw Triple H retain the title clean after hitting the pedigree on Booker. It was a terrible ending to a fairly dodgy story, and fans were in disbelief that Triple H came out still the World Heavyweight Champion. This loss did impact Booker's career, because while he remained popular, it would be another 3 years before he became World Champion. Kofi Kingston had been riding high as WWE Champion since his win over Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 35. However, his reign came to an abrupt end in a squash match. But while Kingston losing the title in this way felt like a booking mistake in itself, it was indicative of a bigger problem at the time with how WWE was being written. Before this, Lesnar had already had a 504-day reign as Universal Champion, where he hardly ever bothered showing up because he was on a part-time contract. Yet Vince McMahon kept going back to him and to the likes of Goldberg and The Undertaker at the expense of younger wrestlers. It was like McMahon had totally forgotten how to create new main event superstars. You had 50-year-old Goldberg squashing the likes of Kevin Owens and Bray Wyatt for the title. This booking philosophy really was a sign that McMahon was past his sell-by date when it came to running WWE. In May 1999, during the Over the Edge pay-per-view, Owen Hart was supposed to rappel down from the rafters during his entrance, but due to a harness malfunction, he fell 78 feet to his death. Later on in the pay-per-view, commentator JR informed the audience watching at home that Owen Hart had died due to the injuries sustained from his fall. Yes, Vince McMahon decided to keep the show going, which many people saw as being incredibly insensitive and disrespectful. The message was clear from Vince: the show was more important than the well-being of the wrestlers. Many of the wrestlers were apparently upset, but they were told that they still had to go out and perform. It would have been really easy to cancel the event and reschedule it, or just refund the fans, especially given that somebody had literally just died in front of everyone's eyes. It was a bad call on McMahon's part and showed how his obsession with the business went way beyond any compassion for his employees.